By the way, that community got hit really hard last night, so thinking of my friends up in the Gary, Indiana area. Prior to this, though, I was the CEO of the Chamber in St. Matthews. When I started at that chamber in 2016, we were hovering around 650 to 700 members. When I left a year ago, they were cranking right at about 1,800. We took them from like number 5 on the book of list to number 2, right behind Greater Louisville Lane. And a lot of that had to do with programming and sponsorship. Because what was a very stuffy, cliquey chamber, we fixed. And I say we because it wasn't just me, it was a team of people who changed the culture, who changed the way we did things. Prior to that, I was on the team at One Southern Indiana, which is the chamber on the other side of the river. Did a lot of sponsorships, events, things of that nature for them. Had great success over there, spent 3 years on that team, and now I'm involved over there again, which was a little weird because I was unengaged for a long time. And I'm a 3-time Indiana University grad. Really proud about that, especially now that I get to come back to represent the university. On the end is my wife and my 2 kids. If you want to hear their stories, that's for another time, because I'm not sponsoring them out. So let's talk about sponsorship. So sponsorship is basically a business investment in whatever you're doing, right? What it is not is a donation. So a business is not sponsoring your event to just hand you money. They want something back for it. And part of what they want back is a relationship. And we're going to really focus in on that word relationship because a lot of times, as this last line says, we think of sponsors, really, we should be thinking of them as partners, not as ATMs. But as nonprofits, we have a really bad tendency to keep doing this and asking them to hand us money and not so much of how can we partner with you and build a relationship with you. And that can lead to problems for you later. So if you don't take anything else from today, take that line with you. They are your partner, not your ATM. And I will push that one really hard today because we do a really bad job of it sometimes. So why do companies sponsor events? Well, I can tell you the number one reason is that they want to increase their brand awareness. On the screen is NWSB, formerly known as New Washington State Bank. They're a Southern Indiana local bank who, quite honestly, has gone through a rebrand in the last couple of years, and as a result of that, they have invested a ton of money back into Southern Indiana. They invested into IU Southeast annual event called IU Bus Fest, which is about 3,000 people who come to campus for a one-day event. But what we did with NWSB is instead of telling them this is what we're going to give you, we asked them to tell us, what do you want? And they came to us with a list of wants, and we gave them almost everything they asked for. And I'll explain to you why in a little bit why we did that. But part of it was to help with their brand awareness. They want to reach specific audiences of people with your events. Not every one of your events is going to hit a sponsor the same way. YPAL, for instance. Not every company is going to want to sponsor YPAL because if they're focused on children, YPAL's probably not the space, right? But you get an organization like, I don't know, Family and Children's Place, where they're specifically targeting children and families, that would be the right avenue. So they're looking for ways to spend their money in places where they think they're going to get the most bang for their buck. They want to demonstrate their community involvement. So for a lot of these companies, part of this is, yeah, it's for them, but the other part of it is, how do we impact the communities we work in and that we spend time in? And they'll pay really close attention to where their staff is serving and where they're volunteering their time. I've had companies that volunteered when I was at the chamber that if their employees said, look, I do a lot of activities with the chamber, I have no problem getting those companies to sponsor events because their people were invested. And they want to be invested in the community as well. They want to build customer loyalty. You know, my world in the chamber side was a lot about building relationships, but the other part of it was giving people a sense of belonging and a sense of showing that they supported the local area. And nothing says to a small business owner, well, to the community from a business owner perspective, that they're invested in the community than joining the local chamber. Because 9 times out of 10, you go into these smaller communities in Kentucky, that's their first question. You go to Cynthiana, Kentucky, I'll guarantee you, the town is going to ask you if you're a member of the chamber, and if you're not, they're not going to support your business. They are very focused on supporting their communities. And then creating networking opportunities is the other one that I think a lot of companies sponsor events for. They want to connect with you, and they want to connect with your audiences. So one of the events that we did at the chamber was our annual dinner. And I will tell you, when I took that event over, it was so boring. Like, I sat in the back, my first one, going, what are we doing? This is painful. And people are paying to be here. So the people in the room who were members of the chamber will tell you, we shifted that thing big time. We created a themed party and people dressed to the theme. One of the very first ones we ever did, Stephen jumped out of a cake dressed as Madonna singing Material Girl.
You're not surprised at all.
And the mayor of St. Matthews loved every second of it. That next year, we sold more sponsorships than we had ever sold before. And I'll come back to that too, because there's a reason I bring that up. Your sponsorship benefits for nonprofits. There's reasons you do this. One, obviously, is to make money, right? You want to make money off of these companies who can diversify your income, give you additional revenue to do other things you want to do. The second one, though, is that it increases your credibility. Because if you get a company like Republic Bank to sponsor your event, your nonprofit is seen differently in the community. They see it as, this is an organization that has their stuff together enough that Republic's willing to put their name on it. Because that's exactly what a company's doing. They're putting their name on your event. And that speaks a lot about your organization. The third one is probably the one that I get the most pushback on from most nonprofits, and even chambers when I was there, is in-kind support. We all have services we need to put events on, right? You need a photographer, you need a DJ, you need lighting and sound and even printing materials. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not doing in-kind work with those companies, you need to get on it. You will save yourself money, because what you're giving them in sponsorship is not nearly dollar value to what they're giving you. What I paid a DJ when I worked for the chamber on the other side of the bridge was probably $3,000 to $7,000 an event, because they did all the lighting, they did all the staging, the whole 9 yards, right? But when we traded it for an in-kind, I gave them a table, I put their logo on some stuff, they got shouted out on the stage. I came out way ahead on that event, way ahead. So that is definitely a benefit for you that you need to be capitalizing on, is in-kind donations. So sponsorships can support a lot of things. What I don't want you to pigeonhole it to is your events and your programs. So much more they can do. We do an event every year at the university called the Chancellor's Medallion Dinner. It is a 550-person event where we give 2 community members an award. It's the highest honor you receive from the university. But the coolest part about this event is that the money we raised from the year before go back to student scholarships. And those students get those scholarships that night. You get 7 of them, $6,000 for one semester, with the opportunity to get another 6 the next semester. So your sponsorships can help drive scholarships. They can pay for capital projects. When we renovated the chamber office, I was selling everything in that room I could sell. You want to buy the door? Fine, I'll put your name on it. You want to sponsor the conference room? Fine, I'll put your name on it. You want to sponsor the kitchen? Fine by me. Anything you're doing in a capital project, sponsor it out. Put a name on it. You go to one Louisville's office, I'll guarantee you that whole office is full of logos and full of opportunity for people to put their name on it. And they'll do it for 2 reasons. One, they want to support the organization, but 2, everybody who walks through that door is looking at whose logo is on the wall, whose name is on that door, whose name is on the desk. They don't care. They just want to see the logo and they want to be out there. It can help you pay for volunteer activities. So, when I worked for the chamber, we would sometimes do volunteer appreciation activities. I didn't pay for any of those out of our general income. It got paid out of sponsorships that people covered and supported us through. And it can cover special initiatives as well. So one of the keys to a good sponsorship opportunity is having the right sponsorship package. And I will tell you that the more creative you are in your approach to sponsorship, the better success you're going to have. And here's what I mean by that. When we develop sponsorships at the university, I look for anything and everything I can get them to sponsor. So if I need pins for the event, you can be the pin sponsor and supply me with pins. I don't have to spend the money on that. You want to speak at the event? Okay, you can be a speaker sponsor, but it's going to cost you, right? You want to host the event? You can be the host sponsor. When I ran the chamber, if you wanted to sponsor the port-a-potty, fine. I will put your name on the top of the port-a-potty with a logo. Anything and everything related to your event can be sponsored out. Don't leave it empty. And when you think about how you develop these packages, be creative with what you give them too. So this picture is from one of the chamber's annual dinners, and one of the things we did is instead of creating our own centerpieces and spending money on them, you paid me to sponsor a table. You did the sponsorship as far as decorating it. So you created the centerpiece to the theme. You incorporated your logo and your promotional materials, but you didn't get to sit at that table that night. I put somebody else at that table so that 8 people are being exposed immediately. But what also happened is, because all the tables were cool and they were fun, people were going and looking at every single one of them. And when you've got 400 people in the room, that's 400 sets of eyes who have seen this display. So be creative in what you choose. And lastly, customize. That is, to me, above everything else in a sponsorship package, is don't just hand me a booklet and say, sorry, this is all there is to offer. Let me tell you, hey, I don't really need a vendor table at the event, but can I have 3 minutes in front of the room? Or maybe I don't want to speak in front of the room, but I want to put a giant backdrop in the back of the room. Fine, if that's what makes you happy, I'll do it. The more flexible you are, the better, because they're more inclined to say yes. But the other side of this customized piece is that relationship piece. It's not me telling the sponsor what they're getting, it's me asking, how can I help you? What are you hoping to gain from this? How can I help you think about how you can capitalize on this sponsorship while also helping our organization meet our financial needs? So I'm going to ask y'all a question. What is something you include in your sponsorship packages now that you consider to be creative or unique? This is an open floor part right here. Go ahead.
We're probably the only organization that at a certain sponsorship level you can get a cutout of Dolly Parton to live in your office.
That's creative. I've never gotten Dolly Parton. That's well done. Anybody else? All right, so that right there tells me you all need to start thinking creatively, right? Get outside of the box. Don't do what everybody else is doing. That's the real key. Because Stephen will tell you from his years of fundraising, if you're following the same circle that everybody else is following, then you're not setting yourself apart from your
I
competition.
have an example. So at Highlands Community Ministries, on Mardi Gras every year we have a Taste of the Highlands. And one of the new things that we introduced this year that really kind of went gangbusters was the People's Choice Award. So we have a bunch of different restaurants from the Highlands set up shop and give out samples, right? And we worked with Matt Lee Digital Solutions to make a coin that had the People's Choice Award sponsor. Fun fact, it was People's Bank. It was the People's Choice Award sponsor. See what I did there? So it got their logo on the coins, and then every person that came in, almost 250 people, got a coin and they got to vote. And they got multiple shout outs from the stage announcing all those rules. And then hopefully they're going to do it again next year, which means I don't have to make more coins.
That's innovative, right? So again, get out of the box, get out of your head, and take a risk. That's the real key, is taking the risk. What we did with that was a risk. People could have said, why would I pay you to let me decorate a table for you? But they didn't see it that way. They saw it as, I get to incorporate my logo at an event. I get an opportunity to have people see my stuff all over the place. And I make sure 8 people leave with physical items in their hand that represent my business.
And you get complete control over how you want those other people to see your business.
Absolutely.
Through the design.
Yeah. Whereas if they sponsored and just handed me a bunch of promo items, we throw them on the table and that's what they look like, right? This, they decided what it looked like.
So you said it was other people that sat at those tables. Did you provide tickets to the sponsor to attend and sit at a different table?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yeah. So they gained, I think they got 1 ticket if they sponsored a table, and then they could sit close by, but they weren't allowed to sit at that table.
Yeah.
And that was by design because we wanted their stuff to get into the hands of different people.
Well,
They
I
were
think
close
that
enough.
that solves the problem too of a lot of larger companies that sponsor lots of things. They really struggle to fill that table with their people for every event because they're committed to so many. And then you have folks at that table that they're not necessarily giving on their own because they're already connected to the company, or you have empty seats because they can't fill it. There's a lot of, yeah.
And if I remember right, yeah, this is the year we did movies. So this is the Willy Wonka table, which if you look at it, it kind of makes sense, right? We had another table that did Beauty and the Beast. They were a hotel. And so they set it up like it was the formal dinner in Beauty and the Beast. And then one of their staff members was dressed like Belle and she's working the room. It's all about giving them that flexibility, be creative, make it their own, but also meeting your needs. We had 30-ish tables in the room, and I think we sold over half of them the first year as sponsors. And every year it got bigger and bigger. So the key is just think it outside the box a little bit. All right, so finding the right prospects. This is always the challenge part, right? How do you find the right sponsors? Well, I will tell you that I always start with who out there shares our mission. So when I looked for companies that, even now, with the university, when we were doing the national championship football watch parties, I went to companies that I knew were IU grads because we had a shared interest or a shared mission, right? They want to support all things IU. I want their money. It's like a happy marriage. And it worked. I had 4 companies sponsor the national championship party, covered all of my costs, and I still banked $500 that I got to use for a volunteer event later. And we packed the room for almost every one of those parties. So they got full engagement in the room. I sent them a list of all of the attendees when the event was over. And then they also, 2 of them had an opportunity to speak. The other 2 got to leave promo items throughout the room. So pretty easy way to get it, but also making sure we're hitting the same causes. If they're supporting a similar cause to what you do, but maybe not your organization, there is no shame in going after somebody else's dollars. Sorry, y'all, it's true. I would go through J-Town and GLI's sponsors all the time and be like, why are they sponsoring them and not us? So then I'd sit them down and go, what do we need to do for you to give us an opportunity to put your name on our event? There is no shame in asking that question. I also look for people who have local decision makers. I would much prefer to work with an organization who has local people who make decisions than to work with a corporate, not here, who don't know us and don't know what we do. And that goes back to the relationship piece. I can't build a relationship with people in Bloomington. They're 2 hours away. But Upland Brewery, who's right down here in Southern Indiana, is an IU grad. So I know I could go to them, develop that relationship, develop that partnership, and get them to sponsor events. Same thing with Doghouse Beer Garden. If you've not been there yet in New Albany, highly recommend. But they are an IU Southeast grad, so he will invest in our organization because he's local and he's here, and I don't have to jump through 14 hoops to get approval for sponsorships. And then lastly, going back to what I said earlier, find those organizations where you're drawing volunteers from them already. Because the squeaky wheel thing is true. The louder their employees are advocating for you as volunteers, the more money you're likely going to get. But if you don't have people on the inside working for you, it makes it even harder. If you've got volunteers who are giving their time, companies will spend the money. They want to support what their people are supporting. Potential sponsors, banks are always a good one. I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit, right? Healthcare organizations, I can't tell you how many times Baptist, Norton, U of L Health, I've gotten money out of all three, both in the chamber world and now at the university level. Our entire medical lab at IU Southeast was paid for by the three hospitals because they know when our students leave, where are they going? They're going right there to them. So if you target it the right way, you'll have no problem getting the money. Professional services, think lawyers, accountants, anybody that's going to work in a B2B atmosphere, they're looking to spend money within organizations. And they need to, because they need to write those off, right? But the other side of it is they know there are people in your rooms who need what they do. But they need the right place to put that brand and put that information out there. And I'm gonna risk this one and say local retailers. There is no shame in asking a small business to sponsor events. None at all. Yes, they may not have the $20,000 that Norton has, but they've got $500. D.D. Taylor at 502M gives more money in this community than any other local small business. And Dee has a harder time saying no than she does saying yes. Because she gets it, right? It's about putting her brand out there. It's about supporting organizations in the community. And she's also strategic. She will have no problem telling you that she will look for organizations where she knows she's going to get some benefit out of saying, hey, the products I sell can help with that ailment you're going through. So don't be afraid to ask local mom and pop shops. They have the money. Don't let them tell you they don't. Stewardship matters. So this is really where it all comes to head for me. We say this in churches, and I'll say it the same way in nonprofits. You need to be a good steward of the money that you're being given, but you also need to be a good steward in telling people thank you and making them feel like what they're doing matters. So when I talk about NWSB earlier, I will tell you that we cater to them really heavily because they give the university over $10,000 a year in sponsorships. But what do they get for that? 4 times a year we sit down with them and we say, how's the relationship going? What can we be doing differently? How do we need to look at this a little differently? And they came to the table with IUS Fest with some dramatic changes they wanted made. And one of them was, we want to see a costume contest for kids because it's an October event. I started fine, IUAA will sponsor it. And they all froze dead in their tracks. And they're like, you're serious? I said, if that's what you want, we'll do it. Because this is a friendship and a partnership. It's not a one-way street. So if you're asking for something, we're going to bend over backwards to make it happen. And granted, you can't always say yes. You have limited staff, you have limited resources. But when you can, do it. You need to send photos and materials to them. Give them the opportunity to showcase what they sponsored and to showcase what you've done with the money they gave you. It's really important. I already talked about meeting, talked about asking what you can do to improve. To me, the bigger piece is staying in touch year-round. So this is not a once a year I show up at Vince's door and ask for money. Vince and I are meeting for coffee 3 or 4 times a year because I don't want Vince to feel like this is a transaction. This is a friendship, this is a partnership. We treat it that way. And if you're not treating it that way, you need to be. Because all it feels like to that company is you're constantly putting your hand out and there's nothing coming back. Now, how do you give them what they're looking for when it comes to coming back? We'll talk to that in a minute. But how are you being a good partner? That's a question you need to think about. How are you and your organization being a good partner to that company that invested in you? We don't have to answer that one now. I'm sure that'll come up here in a little while. One of the things we do is we give them basically a list of the ROI after the event. We did this at the chamber, we do it at the university. So I will tell them, here's the attendance numbers. If I can get away with it, I'll give them a list of the attendees. I do not give them email addresses because I don't want to get in trouble, but they at least get name, and then if I've got, what company they were with, they get that as well. We track social media impressions on every event we crank out. They get all of that data. They get all of the data on the email reach. If we get media coverage on anything we do, they get an email with all of the links to every piece of media that we got off of the event. And then lead generation opportunities. I look for ways that they can benefit from the opposite way. If I can't give them email addresses, I may send an email back out to my attendees and say, hey, thanks for coming to the event. Quick shout out to our sponsor, NWSB. If you're looking for local banking needs, they'd love to talk to you. Reach out to Todd, here's his number. The more you can give them and the more benefit you can show them, the more likely they're going to come back. And it all goes back to that relationship, not transaction. So to basically wrap this up, again, sponsorship is a business partnership, not just fundraising. Yes, it's about the money, but it's really about that long-term sustainability. The best part about sponsors is that they create value for both organizations, and then strong relationships lead to multi-year investments. And I will tell you, when I worked at the Chamber, there were organizations that we worked with for 5 to 7 years at a time. Independence Bank being one of them. Lewis drove me crazy, their market president. But here's the thing, if I called Lewis and said, hey, I've got an idea, and I want to put your name on it, he would jump at it. And it wasn't because he wanted to throw his money around. It's because he respected the Chamber, the work we were doing, and he wanted to be a part of anything we were doing out in the community. And we did that back the other way. When they would do community events, in their parking lot, we'd have a table. Did we get very many people come by? No, it didn't matter. We were there because Lewis supported us when we needed him, and we were going to be there to support him when he needed us. Any questions?
Can you elaborate on in-kind support?
Sure. I'll give you a couple of examples of how we used it. So when I worked for the Chamber in Indiana, there's a company, they no longer exist, they've been bought out, L&D Mailmasters. So they do printing. They printed all of my programs and all of our mailings in exchange for being a $1,500 sponsor of an event. So for that $1,500, they got a table at the event, their logo was on the screen, they got a shout out from the CEO, maybe a couple other small things here and there. 90% of what we gave them didn't cost me anything. And if it did, it cost me the minimal. Because when you factor in like event tickets, if you factor in what you spend on the food, which is really all you're out of pocket for, it's almost like this much in comparison to what you're getting back from the organization. So think about those services you need. Find somebody to trade with you in exchange for sponsorship. You're saving money. Really, you're making money. And they're still getting their name on everything in the room. They're getting seen as somebody who invested in the event. Really, all they did is they worked for you for a couple hours in exchange for the brand recognition in the space. Does that make sense?
I guess I don't really understand what's in kind about that.
Well, they're not charging you for the service. And what little you're giving them doesn't cost you.
Right.
Because if I have a table of 8 that I give them at an event, and the count for you as an attendee is $50 a person, but I'm only spending $20 on food, I've only spent $160. I didn't spend any money on dropping their logo on the slideshow. It doesn't cost anything to have the CEO say their name from the stage. So the in-kind is you're getting a whole lot more than they are financially. Now they're getting a lot of play in the room. You're getting a lot more on the financial side. That's why they use the term in-kind.
What was one of the things that you didn't agree to with NWSB?
So one of the things we did not give them was that they wanted to have, so we had trunk or treating in the parking lot, which they did. And then they wanted to have another table in the commons where people were watching the football game.